Hello, my name is Bert, and we're going to take you through the process of remounting the radiator in the Model A. I'm coming up with a whole new setup to try to avoid the vibration that the old radiator was getting. And yes, if you just saw the video, I did crash my drone. I decided I could try to fly the drone into the garage and over the car, but as you saw, it got a little too close to the ceiling and it didn't like that, and it bounced around and took off and hit the wall over to the side and crashed. No damage. So getting back to some garage work now that the cruise season ended. A couple weeks ago my radiator was leaking near the top. Let's see here, right where the top hose goes in. Let me get the old radiator here. So here's my old radiator. I noticed fluid dripping out right about here. I put an extra hose clamp on, tightened it down, still had dripping. I had noticed that the opening was kind of flat on the bottom, and I decided that is never going to seal up properly, so I rounded this off, put 3 clamps onto it, put the fluid back in, started the motor, still getting the drip out of here. I did notice down in these lower corners across here, fluid sitting in there. I figured it just drained down from the top and it was sitting in the bottom. So I decided that probably the weld had a little crack here. So I took the radiator out, took it down to Empire Radiator. Well, the guy put the radiator in his pressure checker, and turns out it was not only leaking here, but all 4 corners of the core had leaks. So this is the radiator that I installed 2 years ago. Looks perfectly fine, but it's not worth taking apart and fixing the leaks. I think it was a $250 radiator at the time. So now my question was, what's causing these radiators? This is the second radiator I've had in this car. What's causing these radiators to have so many leaks in the core? My original radiator got about 7 years on it, but started leaking the same way, down in these bottom corners. Well, as it turns out, it's a 32 Ford radiator, because it's I use a 32 Ford grill shell on the front. The radiators mount directly to the frame in 2 spots. These bottom tabs sit there. Well, I had cushions in there, and then you use this supposedly a spring setup to allow the radiator to flex. Well, these springs are so solid, you just might as well just have a stack of washers in there when you tighten it down. So I don't think there was much flex going on at all. And due to the suspension on the old Ford hot rods, every time you hit a bump in the road, that shock is felt by the frame and transmitted right into the radiator. And I believe that's what's cracking these radiators. So I have a new radiator. It's not an expensive one because I don't want to spend $1,000 and have it crack all to pieces on the rough roads. What I'm going to do, I want to mount a plate across here on pads, create a support to go around the radiator and fasten the radiator to this frame with some nice padding, so the frame hopefully will take up the shock from the road and not transmit as much of that into the radiator. The radiator will be allowed to have some flex. I've got this piece of steel. I'm thinking that this might be good for the crossbar support at the bottom. I'm going to take this side off of it. So let's take this over to the bandsaw and do some cutting. Okay, that piece is cut off of there. My bottom piece should work just fine. Let's see how it fits. Yep, it's going to go right across there. Holes, we'll bolt it down with pads underneath of that. For side rails, I've got two pieces that should mount right on the bottom plate, and they should mount right like this on the radiator. Or the radiator should mount to these brackets just like that. So these will make my side rails to the radiator frame. I had this nice curved piece of steel. I think it came out of an old microwave I had. It didn't quite have enough curve to it because I thought I could use it on the top of the radiator for the brace going across the top. So I cut some grooves, made a few bends, and now it fits the radiator very nice. So now this bracket to fit the top of the radiator needs to be trimmed down so that it fits inside the grill shell. I will attach these two pieces of metal to the top of the side rail. Then I can bend it to meet up with the rail that goes over the top of the radiator. So now we get a lot of measurement, a lot of welding, shaping to make this frame fit the radiator exactly. So I'm going to go on with that and pick this up in the next video with these frame pieces welded up. Join me at the next video and see how it turns out.